joint live stream between myself, Jesse Lang here at Unlocked, and Brad Clarizio with Foundations First. We are a nationwide Facebook group to teach people to buy and manage long-term rentals. Brad has a very local, Central Ohio-based Facebook group that is more centered kind of around our local community and all that here. So, two different audiences, but both super relevant topic that we have today. So, Brad, if you want to introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Jesse. My name's Brad Clarizio. I am one of a couple of admins for Foundation First, which, as Jesse said, is a Central Ohio-based real estate investment group that is filled with like-minded people who are looking to achieve some level of success through the power of real estate. So our group does not have a specific focus other than real estate investing. And so Jesse has been an instrumental piece of our group with her page being specifically focused on, the small, medium landlord management. And, we've got a guest on today that has a really, in a way, a morbid topic, but also one that is going to be relevant to some of us, or I'm sorry, all of us someday.
At some point.
Depending on how technology changes, it'll be relevant to all of us someday. So I'd like to welcome Matt Gibson. Matt is the co-owner of Pappas Gibson, which is a local attorney firm here in Central Ohio that focuses on wills, estates, and trusts. And so, Matt, I don't know how long it's been, but a few years ago, I started to look at my own personal portfolio and think, man, if I were to get hit by a truck someday, tomorrow, I'd be screwed because I don't have anything that says where my small empire goes, right? So what happens if that were to happen to me? And ultimately, I found Matt. And, when I first called Matt, I said, Matt, talk to me like I am completely stupid when it comes to this stuff, because frankly, I am. I have no idea how to do a will. I have no idea what any of this stuff means. But I did read a book one time about how the Carnegies lost everything. And I don't want that to be me. And so ultimately, Matt helped me create a shell or a protection for, God forbid, I were to pass away. My family is taken care of through the various vessels that we created. So without further ado, Jesse, do you have anything to add before I formally kick off Matt?
Well, I just want to say yes. So we go live through a program called StreamYard. We have the comments on the side, but we can't see who's posting the comments unless you give Facebook permission to let us see your name. So we want it to be really interactive. Throw out your questions as we go through, and we'll get them answered as best as possible. We'll have Q&A at the end as well. But go ahead and throw those questions in the comments as soon as you think of them. And I want to ask you guys, let us know, can you hear us? Can you see us? And what group are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments. Are you here with Foundations First, or are you here with Unlocked? And let's get some energy going, and we'll turn it over to Matt to take it away.
Yeah, so thank you, Brad and Jesse, for the introduction and the opportunity to talk to your groups. So when you guys mentioned this to me, I wasn't really sure where exactly to begin. So I went to ChatGPT and searched up, write an outline for what to talk to real estate investors about with estate planning. So that was kind of helpful. So I'm going to actually kind of look over to my ChatGPT to see what I should be talking about. But
you really did that?
What's that?
You really did that?
I really did, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought you were kidding. Hey, I love it, man.
You guys,
so it's just for the topics. I have the information all up here. It's just
Did you Google how to write a will before this?
Yeah. I do all my legal documents through LegalZoom. I just pretend I did it myself, but no. So I've been practicing for almost 18 years. Estate planning is really my main practice area. I've done about 5,000 estate plans. We have about 5,000 clients now. We add a couple hundred every year. So I've been very fortunate to just have great relationships around Ohio with financial advisors, accountants, other attorneys, with clients. The one thing I guess I should mention in there too is that I am licensed only in Ohio. Out of state practice is sometimes a little funky. So like if I have clients who have real estate outside of Ohio, or they move, or they're just kind of all over the place, sometimes I could still help them, but that's basically everything I tell you today is pretty much Ohio specific. The rules might be a little bit different in every state, which we could talk about. And then none of this is really legal advice. This is just general information too. So like don't go putting something in place that I talk about and then go dying on me and tell your family that like, well, Matt Gibson told me to do this. So
you're like, I saw this on Facebook and it must be true.
Yeah. I had a law school professor who once told us that if anyone asks for free legal advice, tell them that they're going to get their money's worth, which is actually pretty good, pretty funny. But so anyway, yeah. So estate planning, really what it comes down to is if I could opt out of dying or becoming incapacitated, none of this would be necessary. But the reality is that one or two of those things might happen to you at some point. Hopefully neither one of those have yet, but there's a chance that one of those two things might happen to you, maybe both. So you need to kind of get your affairs in order to make sure that assets pass the way you want if you pass away, and that you have the right people in place to manage affairs if you can't do it for yourself. So estate planning really, it covers those two issues, is if I become incapacitated or if I pass away. Really, I think it's uniquely important for people who have real estate to do some type of planning to make sure that assets avoid probate, which we can kind of get into. And every situation is pretty unique, and you have to think about who's going to manage this and what you're setting them up for if something happens to you. You want to get organized, as we'll talk about, to just, even if you have great documents and they're all in place, you still have to get reasonably organized in case something suddenly happens and you have a family member or friend or even a spouse like thrown in to have to manage this stuff. So basically, looking over at my Chat GPT thing here. So so an estate plan, really, it consists of just basic core documents. Would be a will and powers of attorney. A lot of people have trust and LLCs on top of that too. But basically, if I die, and I always use myself as a hypothetical. I'm not going to say like, if you die, this is what happens, because I know this is morbid. So basically, like, I hypothetically die multiple times a day in these discussions, but that's fine. I'm used to it. So like, if I die, first my assets pass according to joint ownership. And then if something's owned by me individually, it passes to whoever a named beneficiary is. So like, if I make Jesse the beneficiary on my life insurance for some reason, it doesn't matter what my documents say, doesn't matter what my will says, my trust says, I said to the life insurance company, give this money to Jesse so she gets it if I die. So it avoids probate with the beneficiary designation, but it passes to whoever's named. So your will is really only there to deal with what does not have a beneficiary already listed. So
Matt, I want to make sure people understood that, because you told me that last week, and that was frankly shocking to me. So I have life insurance. I have whole life insurance. A lot of debate about that. Maybe a whole different topic at one point. But you're saying that who I designate on my lifeinsurance.com, I can't remember who it's through, which is another sad story, but who I designate on that website, that takes precedence, even if in my will it says I'm leaving it to whoever, to Jesse.
I'm gonna get rich.
You're getting a lot of money in this conversation, Jesse.
The beneficiary designation within that vendor supersedes a will.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So the will is only there to capture what does not have a beneficiary. So like if you ever hear the term avoiding probate, that idea comes up a lot. What that basically means is that everything I own, all my bank accounts, investment accounts, real estate, life insurance, everything that I have avoids probate by having beneficiaries listed. So
silly
go
question.
ahead, Jesse.
These are real estate groups. So if I own a piece of real estate, where would a beneficiary be listed?
That's a good question. So Ohio allows for real estate to be owned and transfer on death form. So like your house can be in your name, transfer on death to whoever you want to receive it. If they want to take it after you pass, they file an affidavit. It's called an affidavit of confirmation, saying that they actually do want the property, and they basically get it transferred into your name. Like if you're leaving me some property that has, like, you haven't paid real estate taxes in 20 years and you dumped a bunch of like gas all over it or whatever it is, like I might say like, well, I don't really want that, so I don't file that affidavit to accept the property. But yeah, you could file a transfer on death affidavit in Ohio to keep the property out of probate. So a lot of states allow that now, but that's something to check in whatever state you're in to see if that's available. Where it's not an option, you could do deeds to a trust. You could do it's called a ladybird deed, but it kind of accomplishes the same thing. It works like a transfer on death designation, basically, where you retain a life estate. That's a whole bunch of stuff that if we go into, you might fall asleep. Not that everything else right now is super exciting, but that's even more boring than what we talked about. So there's options basically to keep real estate out of probate. It's a lot easier with other assets, but you probably need to contact an attorney to keep real estate out of probate. Now, with that said, if you have an LLC that owns the real estate, the LLC itself can be transfer on death. So like my clients who have LLCs, you just sign a 1-page assignment that says like my interest in ABC LLC is transfer on death to my wife if she survives me, or to our trust if she does not. And that covers everything that LLC owns. So all the real estate, bank accounts, everything is covered by that one document. So
yeah, Matt, that's kind of what we discussed last week, because Jesse, so, I have a ton of partnerships, right? So the question is, if I have, like, this is something Matt and I literally just talked about last week, was, as I create new partnerships, I have a holding company that owns almost all my partnerships, right? Let's call it Clarizio Y, and that owns it's not that, but that owns the 50% ownership within that partnership. So when I met with Matt last week, it was, hey, since we met last, I've opened up 3 new partnerships. Do I need to add these specifically into my documents? And he's like, no, because they're still owned by that holding company. And that holding company has directive to say, if I pass, it goes to my wife. My 50% goes to my wife. If she passes with me, it goes to this person. If my kids are, so it's a big, long kind of if-then statement. Right. And so I don't have to update these documents every single time I create a new partnership, as long as the holding company, so of all the LLCs, all the S-Corps I have, all the partnerships, I think I only have 3 LLCs and S-Corps named within my documents, because they all own certain structure. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can also help out with that structuring of businesses as well, to make sure that people are protected. So asset protection is kind of something you guys do as well.
Yep, definitely.
We get a lot of questions about asset protection from our students. So as we go through, if that comes up anymore, definitely call it out. I want to say, for those who don't have tons of partnerships out there, I mean, Brad's been investing forever. The same concept applies to your single LLC above many properties. So just whatever the top entity is, as long as that has the directive, then everything below it is covered. Am I understanding?
Yep, you are.
That's correct. Yep. Awesome.
Yeah. So what we have, like what my wife and I have, what I think most people who are listening to this probably would need, is a trust. So I'm not like out there peddling trust, but they just work well because basically, if you want to avoid probate, you could do the transfer on death option. Like we have 3 kids. I could say that everything we own just passes to the 3 of them and it avoids probate. It kind of goes from us up here to our kids down here. It doesn't have to go through probate. The nice thing about a trust is that everything can collect in one place and you can have 1 or 2 people. You could have a bank. If anyone works for a bank, they probably like that idea. I tend to not like that idea, but you can have someone who manages just the collection of all those assets and then the division among your beneficiaries. And that's what a trustee does. So like, just not to mix terms, but like your trustee manages how that trust functions. And then you get your executor who's dealing with the probate process, which hopefully you don't really have anything to do there, but you often name the same person. So like if I die, Jesse's in charge of my estate. There you go. You get more money, more responsibilities here. So like if she goes into the bank and I have something that's transfer on death to my trust and she's my trustee, she kind of puts on her trustee hat, goes into the bank, collects the money from the bank, and we're good to go. If I don't have a beneficiary on that account, what the bank will tell her is that they need a death certificate, a claim form, and a letter of authority. That's what it's called in Ohio. Every state gives it a slightly different name. What they're really telling Jesse is you have to go through probate to get appointed as the executor and come back here with like your sheriff's badge that says you are the executor, and then we'll listen to what you're going to do. So it's a pain in the butt because you have to go get that form from the probate court. Then you have to report back to the probate court on all the assets that you found and how you valued them and what you did with them. And it's a 9-month to 1 year long process if you have to go through that.
So for any of you guys who are doing direct to seller marketing and you're coming across sellers who are in the middle of a long probate case, this is why it takes so long for them to be able to sell the house. So you can not only learn from your point of view, but the sellers are going through the same process because they weren't set up in the right structure. And now they're tied up in court for 9 to 12 months.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, you want to avoid that if you can when you're doing your planning. So a trust tends to work well because you get people in charge who are dividing it up. And then from there, the way most of our trusts are structured now is what some people refer to as a beneficiary controlled trust. But the idea is that if assets come into like our trust, I'm going to draw a picture here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but like there's our trust, that bucket.
It's a bucket.
Good. Yep, that's a bucket. So things come into that bucket.
It's a good bucket.
Thank you. It's 3-dimensional. So that's impressive. So then we have 3 kids. So they each get, this camera's throwing me off because it's like everything's backwards.
Yeah.
No, we can see it. Yeah, if you hold it back up, we can see it.
I need to move it. I need to know where. Okay, so like we have our main trust divides up into these 3 buckets, and then each one of our kids gets a bucket. So everything in these trust shares is protected from divorces, lawsuits, protected from future estate tax. But our kids eventually take over as their own trustee. So like we have my accountant, who's my best friend from college. He lives in Maine. He's in charge as the trustee. But then when our kids turn 30, they become their own trustee.
And you determine that age or that set?
It's set in our document. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So 30, I mean, it's probably the most common age people pick. You get like the full frontal lobe development going on, which is nice. And then like you have a couple years of realizing that even if you're making like $100,000 a year, you pay taxes, like contributions to your retirement comes out, maybe health insurance comes out, and you don't have as much money as you think you're going to have as you're coming out of college. So I think a lot of those habits tend to stick. So up until our kids are 30, if they want a new like cyber truck or like mega yacht or whatever, they have to call the trustee and say like, I want this thing. And he says, well, that's maybe a good idea, bad idea, whatever, like maybe a cheaper truck, but whatever. So he decides all that with them. But then once they're 30, they take over as their own trustee. So what you tend to see a lot more often is kind of a staggered approach of like a kid can get half at like 30 and all of it at 35. But we don't do that often, because as soon as that money leaves the trust, it's not protected from creditors anymore. If a kid gets divorced, it should be a non-marital asset, but if they start commingling it, then they potentially lose it in a divorce. So it just makes a lot more sense to leave it in the trust. So this is a good question.
We're not quite at Q&A yet, but this is super relevant. So how exactly would it be protected from a divorce?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't know. ChatGPT just told me. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, that's a joke. No, so it's protected because first of all, it's a non-marital asset. So like marital assets are things that you acquire during the marriage. That's what gets split when you get divorced. And again, we're talking about Ohio here, but I'm pretty certain that this is true across every state. So what you acquire during the marriage, that gets divided in a divorce. But what you inherit and what you bring into a marriage is a non-marital asset that you would not split in a divorce. But the problem is, like, if my wife and I have $100,000 between the two of us, I'm just making this stuff up. Don't judge me about that number. But if we have $100,000 between the two of us and I just inherit like $1 million, it's really hard for me to say, like, we're going to keep going out to like Arthur's Treachers or whatever for dinner. Like we're not going to go to like a fancy restaurant ever. We're just going to keep eating like drive-through fish for the rest of our lives. And we're not touching that $1 million that I just inherited. And the only reason why we leave it there is because it's protected in a divorce. Now, if I get it in a trust, I can go to my wife and say, like, drive-through fish is actually not that bad. This money's in a trust. It's protected if I get like sued for malpractice, because I just did this Facebook video and all these people are trying to take legal advice from it. So like everything in that trust is protected if I ever got sued. And it's also not subject to estate tax. Like if we get, and this is generally true, we'll get into taxes in a little bit, but like if I get $1 million in that trust and it grows to like 100 million, that money's not in my estate. It's in that trust. It's not subject to estate tax when I pass. So like that's another reason to just leave it alone. So now again, if I ever get sued for anything, nobody can compel a distribution from that trust to pay them. I can use it to pay my rent, buy my own food, like whatever I want to do, but no creditor can ever get to that money. So does that make sense?
So Matt, yeah, it does make sense. I think, we've kind of established that a will is like the lowest level catch-all for anything that you don't already have defined, beneficiaries designated, and a will it goes within an estate. Is that correct?
Yeah. So these words, we're talking about this is how it gets a little confusing. So like your will is really there to dispose of any assets that have to go through probate. And you never could be 100% certain that you covered all your bases. Like I've had clients who have died in car accidents and you open up an estate to sue the other driver. Like everything else they own could be transferred on death, but maybe you have this insurance claim now that has to go through probate. So you can never be 100% certain that you've avoided probate, which is where the will kicks in. And then you also name guardians if you have minor children or children who are incompetent, like you would name a guardian in the will for them. Your estate is really, I don't really use that term because it can refer to a couple different things and it gets a little confusing. So like you can refer to a probate estate, which those are the assets that go through probate. You can also have your estate for estate tax purposes, which can include stuff that avoided probate, but it's basically like everything that I own if I die, like that the government, which this might be the good topic to get into next, especially if I'm following that ChatGPT outline here, because this is the next subject. But like so my estate for estate tax reasons, that includes stuff that avoided probate and stuff that is subject to probate. So right now, there's a $13.61 million estate tax exemption. and you can
Say
basically
that again.
double. What's that?
Say it again.
13.61 million.
Okay.
So for a married couple, this isn't exactly precisely true, but you can basically double that to have a $27.22 million exemption.
So any assets up to that amount in an estate will not be taxed for a married couple, and then half that for just an individual.
Yes. So everything up to that threshold goes to your beneficiaries completely free of any estate tax.
You guys, how powerful is what we just talked about? I hope everyone is passing way more than $13 million along, right? But if you're not, if you're under the $13 million threshold, we're talking zero taxes on transfer. I mean, let us know in the comments, like, how would that change your life? I mean, how much would you save?
Well, you'd be dead, but
yeah. Well,
okay,
so
sorry, how would that change other people?
Yeah, how would that change your family's life? Yeah.
Yeah. How much would you be saving in taxes if there were an inheritance tax applied?
Yeah, so anything above that threshold, there's a 40% tax rate. So
man, I might want to stop now then. All right.
Yeah, if you go back, like I forget how long ago exactly, like 25 years ish, it was a $600,000 exemption, and there was a rate that could fluctuate from 41% up to 55%. It was
wow.
So
jeez.
Over time, it increased from like 600 to 675 to $1 million to $2 million. Really, the modern history of the estate tax kind of dates back to when Obama was in office. It got set to $5 million per person, $10 million for a couple, basically. You used to not be able to double it as a couple, which got in all types of like AB trust and all this other types of planning that, again, you'd fall asleep if I told you about that. We can get into it if that excites you. That's cool. So like it was basically $5 million a person, $10 million for a couple. And then when Trump was in office, there was a debate among Republicans as to whether that figure should just be blown up so that we wouldn't have an estate tax anymore. That was kind of the House Republican stance. And then the Senate Republicans wanted to double the exemption. And the Senate version ended up basically winning out within the Republican Party. So we had a doubling of the exemption, and that sunsets in 2026. So under Obama, the figures were adjusted for inflation. So we've just kind of had it creeping up over time. But in 2026, there's a chance, it depends on who you talk to, how good of a chance that is, but there's some chance that figure drops down to maybe 7.5 million per person, 15 million for a couple, somewhere around there.
If you're planning on dying soon, do it before 2026.
That's what it sounds like.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Dark.
That's basically like, yeah, that sums up the rest of my talk right there. But, no, so like that, it's true. And it's also, the estate tax exemption and the gift tax exemption are the same thing. So like while I'm living, I don't need to die to give my kids that 13.61 million. I could give it to them right now as a gift, and there's no gift tax. And then anything that I gift or above that, or that I die and give to them, that's subject to a tax of 40%.
So Matt, if I leave my daughters 5 houses that are, free and clear, or maybe not even free and clear, but let's say they sell those 5 houses, I'll be rolling in my grave. But let's say they do decide to sell them. Are they? Oh, there's the question. Actually, right
Literally,
there
it is.
So,
yeah.
Like if they sell that, do they pay tax on the income, or is
so this is the crazy thing, like that. Those exemption figures, again, everything up to that's tax free. Everything above it is a 40% tax. But everything that I leave to my kids when I die, the current law, it's always been this way, but there's been talk that this might change. But the current law is that my kids get it with a step up in basis. So what a step up in basis means is that the basis gets stepped up to my date of death value. And the idea behind this really, it originates because like if if my grandfather left my mom farmland, who left it to me, and I want to leave it to my kids, like nobody knows what the heck the basis in that was because it was purchased so long ago. So the government's idea basically is like, we don't care what it was, what you paid for it. We care what everything is worth when you die. And if you're below this, we don't care. If you're above it, give us 40% of that excess. So like if I bought a piece of real estate for $100,000 that's worth $1 million when I die, my kid's basis is now $1 million. It's stepped up to that date of death value.
Got it.
So if they sell it for $1 million, there's no capital gain tax. If they keep it and depreciate it and then sell it after a couple of years, there might be some capital gain tax, but there's still this huge chunk of gain that gets wiped out through that step up in basis.
And the 13.2 million, that's based on the 100,000, not the million.
No, so the 13.61 exemption that I have, that looks at what everything's worth when I died. So
got it.
So yeah, but the one little caveat there is retirement accounts. So like retirement accounts, like this big cloud of income that is above you while you're living, and it grows and you can day trade and it's beautiful and you don't pay tax. And then like once you start taking distributions, once it starts raining, that's when you pay the income tax on that money. So if I take that cloud and I leave it to my kids, the new rule, this is as of maybe 19, I think, is that they have 10 years to take that money out. There's some exceptions to this, but generally they have 10 years to take all that money out, and they pay the income tax on it when it leaves the account. That's not true for Roth IRAs, but for non-Roth retirement accounts, they're going to pay the income tax as the money leaves the IRA. So it's almost gets doubled twice. There's some deductions that make that not exactly true, but like that IRA, if I have a $15 million IRA, I'm going to be over the exemption a little bit. So our kids are going to pay estate tax, but then they're also going to pay income tax as the money leaves the IRA and they have to receive those distributions.
Gotcha. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's money that they're getting, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, you're paying tax on it, but it's like paying the taxes on lottery winnings. You still won the lottery. Like you're fine. So
yeah, and one way to kind of look at it is like they get that first tranche tax free, and then above that, it's almost like its own income tax rate. Like it's this top tax bracket above your top rate of 37%. Where like if you inherited this and you inherited that much already, but now you're getting more than that, then you're gonna get hit with a 40% tax. So there's ways around it. You can do estate freeze techniques like installment sales, grats, all this other stuff, but that's a whole other discussion probably.
So I think, Matt, at the end of this, we are most definitely going to share your contact info. If anyone has really specific kind of nitty gritty questions about their personal situation, clearly he's an expert and you guys can get your questions answered. We could go on the nuances all day. I kind of want to bring it back maybe high level. And if there was, of course, everyone's situation is different, but what would you consider maybe the ideal structure to sleep well at night, knowing that my assets are protected if worst case happens?
Yeah. So I would say there's really 4 steps to estate planning. Yeah. And this is true in pretty much everybody's situation. The first one is to have basic documents in place. Like you need a will in case something goes through probate. You need powers of attorney so that if I become incapacitated, nobody has to go through probate to be able to pay a bill or sell a piece of real estate or make a healthcare decision. So powers of attorney allow you to avoid a guardianship. So that's a big deal. Those might be the most important things you sign actually, even though they're very simple documents. So first step is having those documents in place. Second step is doing beneficiary designations to keep assets out of probate. And a lot of people kind of stop there. Now the problem is that you can put your family in the scavenger hunt, which I kind of call it, where like you see this happen sometimes where a parent passes, someone passes, and all of a sudden people are trying to find where they had accounts. And
Yeah.
Like, where did they bank? Did they have life insurance? And you're digging through old files to try to basically recreate a balance sheet to figure out what needs to be transferred. Now, this is super important if you have a real estate portfolio. So like my mom, as an example, has a checking account, an IRA, and a house, and that's it. So like that's pretty simple to navigate. If something happened to her, my siblings and I would be able to step in and manage that. But if you have multiple rental properties and you have lease agreements and like all these different bank accounts and money's flowing into, you don't want people on a scavenger hunt trying to figure out where everything is. So the third step is basically like get organized, have a file. And I had someone who, as part of this, had like their Blue Sky car wash code written down for their kids. Like I wouldn't go crazy like that. Like you don't need to go to that degree of detail, but I would have a list or like, here's where all my assets are. Here's where my bank accounts are. Here's the properties I own. Here's where you can find the lease agreements. Like you want someone to be able to just open that up and find out all the relevant information that they need in a matter of minutes, instead of them like having to be on that scavenger hunt. Go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, last week I'm sorry, Jesse. But
no, you're fine. Go.
Last week when we spoke, you called it, you said to me, and I'll never forget this because I said it to my wife that night, you said, Brad, you need to create a death playbook. And I was like, ugh. But it's true. It's, even if it's a 2-pager and it's, hey, if I die, here's my accountant, here's, my primary bank accounts, here's my partners. I mean, my wife doesn't know all my partners. I mean, I do these spin up businesses that she has no idea. She chooses not to know about it. So, if I were to kick it tomorrow, she would have no idea where to start. We actually established that last week. So, Jesse,
so one core component of what I teach our students and teach our community is good record keeping, getting organized. We actually have a data management system that is built for things exactly like this. It may not have all your bank accounts. You could add it, but it's all your properties, all your mortgages, every, tenant, all everything you need in one place. So potentially give your spouse, give your trustee the account or a login to that data management system, and they're going to have everything at their fingertips. So many ways to get there, but definitely get organized. I'm taking notes in the comments. So what's number 4?
The fourth one is like, let people know where that is. So like if you have that data management system and everything's already in there, but they don't know, like then it hasn't really served its purpose. So the fourth step is really making sure that whatever it means to you to get organized, like whatever your playbook is, or like I've had people keep green folders in the den because the kids are supposed to know that like green means money. So like there's a green binder that has all the information that they need in it. But if you don't know where that information is, then you're still on a scavenger hunt until you find it. So that's the fourth piece is after you've gotten organized to step 3, fourth step is making sure that the people who you're counting on for this, they know where it is. And you don't need to give it to them ahead of time. Like I don't need to sit my brother down and be like, look how much money I have. Like but it just needs to be like, here's where you find the information that you need. Like the den, the computer, and wherever you keep it, they just need to be able to access it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
Brad, did you have any other high level questions before we open Q&A?
Yeah. So obviously I've referenced a couple times that like, you and I spoke last week. That's what kicked this whole thing off, but that's not why I called you in the first place. It was, hey, Matt, it's been a couple of years since, I randomly out of the blue just thought about it, right? It's been a couple of years since I established my estate planning. A lot has changed with my business. A lot has changed with my family. I had 2 kids since we talked. I couldn't believe it had been that long, but we're also cranking them out 1 per year. So, I basically just called you to say, hey, is there anything I need to do? I want to make sure this is up to date. So what kind of ongoing maintenance does this estate need as your business grows? This kind of ties back into foundation first, setting it up right in the beginning. Makes it really easy in the future because Matt told me I didn't have a ton to do. So what kind of maintenance do you suggest?
So the more complicated your situation is, the more kind of active management I think you're going to have, which is fine. But I'll kind of tell you how the sausage is made a little bit. So maybe tell you about my firm too. So basically, like if someone comes in for an estate plan, We meet for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. I ask questions that I need the answers to, but I'm not going to make you do like a 10-page questionnaire. I just gather the information I need to be able to prepare the documents, which typically takes a day or two. We do it on a flat fee that's typically somewhere between $1,200 and $2,200 for will, trust, financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, transfer on death for real estate and business interest. We also have an online service that I just rolled out. It's planinplace.com. So it's basically like LegalZoom, except that you give real legal advice. It's not self-help where you're filling out your own documents on some pretty website. You're actually like telling me the information I need through a questionnaire, and then I give you documents and you sign on your own. So that's typically like $900 to $1,000. So we try to be priced pretty competitively. But so the way we prepare documents is through a document automation system where all these different variations of the documents that we prepared over like the 50-year history of our firm, kind of dating back to the firm we left. All those different variations get put into this document assembly program. And I can go through this questionnaire and create documents very efficiently that way. It's not relying on some third party to give me documents. We're not going to give you a binder of like 300 pages of crap. It's like concise, good legal documents. And then if you need to update it, getting back to really Brad's point, now that I'll step off my soapbox there and get back to Brad's point. All we have are Word documents. So like if you say you want to change a trustee or like leave one kid more than another kid because maybe you helped the one kid out with a mortgage or wedding or something, like it's not that hard to go into a Word document and edit it, reprint it, and sign. Like it's not rocket science to do that. The updates from a drafting standpoint typically take like 5 to 15 minutes to prepare the documents. And then sometimes people want to meet for a half hour to an hour, again, just to catch up and ask basic questions. And that's fine, but it might make it a little bit more expensive to go through an update. But as a general rule, I'd say 3 to 5 years is probably a good idea just to look at your documents. You don't necessarily need to call an attorney, but at least you can look at your documents and see, are these still the people we want named in these roles? Like, do the ages that we have kids getting money still make sense? Yep. Just stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And mine, remember, the reason I called you was, hey, I've got a bunch of new partnerships and I got a couple new kids. And we didn't have to make any updates at all because, well, one, my partnerships were owned by an entity that already had a direction. It already said, if I die, it goes here. So no updates there. And then the way that you had phrased the documentation was, any surviving children, which if I have 3 more, whatever it is, they're all covered. So the way that
those definitions like that's typically how I do it. If you're like in a Wilt Chamberlain situation, you might want to be more specific about who your kids are. But I think for most people, that including afterborn kids is pretty easy.
Yep, absolutely. So okay.
I have a Q&A question that I think is pretty high level and relevant to a lot of folks here. So if you have a house that's in a trust and I want to sell that property, does that make it more difficult to sell?
A little bit. There's no question about that. I mean, so title companies, they're going to ask all types of questions about your trust. They're probably going to want a memorandum of trust that they can record to establish what you could do, who's the trustee. So it adds like a little bit of a hassle, but it's typically not that big of a deal. But with that said, like that's why I generally recommend transfer on death. So your next line of beneficiaries, it's worth that hassle for them. But while you're living, if you sell your own property, you don't want to be dealing with that mess. So I would leave it in your name. Almost always, I'd leave it in your name and make it transfer on death to a trust.
Okay. I'm looking through. I think we got most of the questions as we were live.
There's one, Jesse, I think that might be on some other folks' mind, if you don't mind. It's just if you've already got something in place that was done by another attorney, are you able to modify another attorney's stuff if they wish to call you, or are you married to that person for life? Oh, there we go. Gosh, whoever's doing this, the odds behind it, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you can update it with any lawyer. So on the one hand, it's a lot easier for me to just create it from scratch than it is to go through like a 300-page binder and figure out like this should stay, this should change. Like my boilerplate's better, but we can live with this section over here. It's a lot easier just to start clean. With that said, and I'm not like giving you a marketing pitch. I'm just explaining this to anyone who talks with any attorney. With that said, like I had a meeting on Friday last week where these people brought in like 2 big red pleather binders. And I was like, yeah, we're just going to update all that stuff. It's going to take me like 2 hours to redo everything. And they were like, oh, but we paid like $8,000 for this. Like, that's fine, but we're going to be shredding it in a little bit. Like, I'm sorry.
Nice.
And it, like they didn't want to like part ways with it, but what we're doing is just like, if I'm going to be their attorney, these are my forms. I'm more comfortable with it. And I just think the language is preferable. But
yeah, and I mean, I want to touch on that cost again. $1,200 to $2,200. I mean, guys, I spend more than that on dumpsters per week.
Yeah,
and
no brainer.
I mean, for me, I would expect this. I remember when you first gave me your price, and I thought, geez, there's no reason I wouldn't do this. So again, guys, when you think about the amount of effort and time and money that we spend on our portfolios, we need to spend that same amount on our future. And there is a book that I'm going to recommend, and it's called, and I read it. It's the last book I read 6 years ago. And it's called What Would the Rockefellers Do? How the Wealthy Get and Stay That Way, and How You Can Too. And I read it, and it was really about how the Rockefellers still have their generational wealth and how the Carnegies don't. And I'm not directly saying that it's due to estates, but it's, again, I'm coming from the foundation first standpoint. Obviously, Jesse is, we believe the same things here. It's important to do these things. And I know that it's not fun. It's not a sexy conversation to have, but I'll tell you, after I did it a couple years ago, I just felt like this general relief that, like, geez, if I die tomorrow, there's at least something out there that, that says what happens to everything I spent the last 13 years of my life working for. So,
and there's a question or kind of comment I see over here about the trust companies being trustees. That's probably worth mentioning too, is what your trustee basically does is collect all of your assets, and then divide it among your beneficiaries. So from there, like our beneficiaries, because our kids are still minors, someone needs to make investment decisions and make distribution decisions from their individual shares. So you do not need a trust company to do that. I do not want my kids calling a bank to say, like, I don't know whether I should go in state or out of state for college. That's not a conversation, and I need to pay for it. Like, what are your thoughts on this? I don't want them calling a trust company. I would rather them call my best friend from college, who's our accountant. Some people pick a sibling. You could pick 2 people to serve together. Mm-hmm. It could be like if we have a sibling who's a guardian, but they're not the greatest with money, but maybe paired with someone from the other side of the family, they'd work well together. You could do something like that. Even if you end up going the route of a trust company, I would still make them accountable to somebody. Like if I'm giving all my money to Jesse and Brad and I think that they can't manage it, and I want like Huntington or Chase to be the trustee, I should still let them remove the trustee. And sometimes it's like, well, they could do this 3 times in their life or whatever. I don't get into that crap. I just say, like, they can remove that corporate trustee and appoint another corporate trustee if they want to. Mm-hmm. Like, you should at least be able to trustee shop and go from a Huntington to a Fifth Third to a Park National Bank or something. So I try to avoid corporate trustees if possible. I just don't think that you need them managing this. I think you name someone who goes and gets outside help from accountants, attorneys, financial advisors, realtors, whoever need property managers, whoever it might be, but you still want them driving the bus, basically. I don't think you want to give those keys to a trust company. So and you'll get different perspectives. There's other attorneys who've had a lot of luxury box meals through certain trust companies will tell you that those trust companies are the greatest. That's fine. They're entitled to that opinion. I err on the side of keeping it with friends and family.
Totally fair. I just want to kind of wrap up and recap. So someone came in late, said, can you help if I live outside of Ohio? So specifically, Matt cannot, but do you have a referral network or anyone that you could recommend if someone contacted you and they were looking in a different state?
No.
That's okay.
I should. Well, there's an attorney in Atlanta who's I've partnered with on some things. She's really good, but that's about it.
It could still be worth reaching out, and maybe you have someone you trust in that location. But if not, you guys, you have some really good kind of overarching, not advice, is not legal advice, but strategy, and kind of the right questions to ask. So even if you're having this conversation in a different state, you have a really good foothold on how to get set up in a strategic way.
Yep. The concept.
So and my fees, like if you're in Naples or like Los Angeles or something, like the fees and what's market would be probably a little bit different, but I would look for somebody who does a lot of this work. Like it shouldn't be, if someone asks a question about like a dog bite, that I'm like, well, I know the answer to that too. Like you should there's a lot of attorneys out there, way too many really, but like they need to specialize. We need to specialize. There's no reason not to be highly focused in certain areas. And then I think you should also be able to get easy, transparent pricing information.
Yeah.
Like if someone can't tell you how they charge and how much it's going to be, that's just weird. Like they should do enough of the work that they either do flat fees or they can give you a range. They can tell you what it depends on. Don't ever be afraid to ask how much something costs. So
yeah,
my favorite question.
Yep.
Yeah, which is perfectly reasonable. Like I always feel bad when people ask me. I'm like, you don't have to. Like it. I know you were nervous about that question. Like, don't be nervous. It's perfectly fine to ask people how much you're going to pay for a service.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like if you went to a restaurant and there's no prices on that's weird. That would make
sense. Restaurant, Matt. There's restaurants like that.
Yeah, there are. Yeah,
does exist.
They're super expensive too.
Yeah. I don't go to them, but they exist.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for our time, Brad. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
No, Matt, I want to thank you as well. This, as you said, it's certainly not the most glamorous thing to talk about, man, but it's important. And I think that everybody should do it, and hoping that they reach out to you. So, Jesse,
how to get in touch. So we will post in the comments here and in Foundation First group as well. And on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, we will post Matt's contact information, and you know his pricing, the offer. So if you guys reach out, just let him know that you found him through our this live stream, and then he'll take great care of you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Laura and my wife Laura and I will be reaching out. We need a refresh, so
okay, I appreciate.
You'll hear from us shortly.
Yep.
Okay.
So Matt, we've got your contact info from your email signature, all that stuff. Yeah. So we'll post all that publicly, and brace yourself, because I've got a feeling that we inspired some people to prepare for death.
Yes. But, it's no brainer. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.